Welcome to this African Institute of Leadership and Governance episode, where I am going just to discuss with you on a very important subject: why Africa needs a new model of governance. Why do we need a new model of governance for Africa? This is your friend and brother, Emmanuel Nkoma, coming to you all the way from KwaZulu Natal, right here. I believe so very much that Africa is rising. I believe so very much that the future of the world is in Africa. I believe so very much that Africa is about to carry the world. I was looking at a number of achievements that we have in Africa. Aeronautics at the moment is totally dependent on Algeria, which is in Africa. When we talk about aeronautics, we are talking about, in order for the aircrafts to fly, we cannot do without Algeria in Africa. Right now, we are talking about electric vehicles that are coming in. We cannot do away with Africa, as we know that cobalt, manganese, lithium, all these are of a high concentration in our continent of Africa. When we talk about hydro energy, its concentration is in Africa. When we talk about gas and we talk about all the kind of mineral resource which most of us are aware that they are in Africa. I come to you today discussing this whole issue that Africa needs a new model of governance, not because of anything else, but because of what is going on in our continent. Today, the continent of Africa is hosting the mining Indaba in Cape Town. And we have heard heads of states of different nations give keynote speeches at the mining Indaba, which is very good. But I want to state categorically here that we have a lot of elements in our continent which are foreign to us. And that is why sometimes Africa is where it is. When we look at the programs that are going on in our continent, when we look at poverty alleviation, when we look at disease alleviation, when we look at all the ills that we have spoken about, we see to it that it seems like the solution has to come out from the West or outside the continent into the continent. I want us to look very closely right now at the model of governance that we have been using. We saw that in the 60s, most of our African countries began to liberate themselves from colonial masters. Leading nations in democracy like Ghana, Zambia, Tanzania, and so on and so forth. We saw the last kid on the block, South Sudan, liberate itself and say they are also an independent state. Why am I sharing all these things to us? It's because I want you to understand that we all rushed into what we call multipartyism. Multi-party democracy, which was given unto us, we need to recognize and realize that democracy is also a foreign thing on our soils and on our continent. Democracy is a foreign thing because it did not originate really in its origin in Africa. but it has been designed to favor a certain class of people. Democracy has been designed to favor those that ascribe themselves into political parties. Democracy has been designed to favor those that seem to be privileged and elite. That is the reason why we see our continent being where it is. I can speak about many other aspects, but today I'm focusing on the areas of governance. We need to begin to ask ourselves questions as Africans to say, before colonialism, how was Africa being governed? Who governed our affairs? Because governance has to do with the distribution of natural resource for the sustainability of man. Governance has to do with the distribution and the management of resource for the sustainability of man. But we see to it that despite that Africa is endowed with so much, we can agree today that in Africa, if you want to be rich, you must be a politician. Why? Because we have seen that the governance systems that we have, they seem to favor those who are privileged in the line of politics. Therefore, multi-party democracy, which is a good agenda, it turns out to be a scam. Have you wondered why that the superpowers or the nations that are from the worst, there was a time that they were supporting and empowering economically, financially, anybody who started a political party in the name of supporting democracy? Why were they doing so? It's because they know that if they put you in power, the first 3 years you have to save those who put you in power. The last 2 years you save either the people or your stomach. We have seen in Africa that when politicians go out there and campaign, they give us good speeches and good morals and they show us like this is going to be done. But once they are put in power, haven't you wondered why every African politician, countries which favor 2 terms in their constitution, every politician wants to go for the second term? Do you know why? It's simple. The first term, they want to favor those that put them in power. The second term, they want to favor themselves or their families for their own retirement. So I am here to call upon every citizen and every African of goodwill that we need to begin to advocate for a new governance model, which I call Africacy. Africacy is totally different from autocracy, totally different from dictatorship, totally different from democracy. Africacy will put the citizens at the center. Africacy is going to put the Africans at the center. The people that put you in power should be your citizens. And Africacy should advocate for ethical leadership. Africacy is there to advocate for ethical leadership. What is ethical leadership, therefore? Ethical leadership should stand for leaders of integrity. I've always said this. When we look at China, before they democratized, they developed. That is the reason why in China, they use selection before elections. They select before they elect. You have to grow into the structures. In Africa, it's all about who's shouting louder. And that's not, being outspoken does not mean you are a leader. Shouting so loud does not mean you are a leader. Having so much money does not mean you are a leader. Because leadership is a centric that God endorses upon people. Even animals in the jungle, they have a leader. Even a swarm of bees, they have a leader. Even ants in the hill, they have a leader. But leadership is endured. Therefore, how do we attain to that? We need to think and begin to say, How did we govern ourselves before our colonial masters? The second thing we need to begin to advocate and begin to ask ourselves the question, how did we govern ourselves then at that time? Then how do we have to govern ourselves now? We have fought for independence. We have fought for democracy. Now we've got democracy. We've got independence. But are we really free? Is an African child out there free? You will realize and recognize that an African child is going to bed without food. An African child is dying with disease. An African child is dying with confusion. An African child is striving and waking up so early, fighting to get out of this continent to go and better their lives somewhere else. And yet, the world cannot exist without Africa. Today at the mining Indaba, we have heard speeches from various presidents. My question is, we know that during the time of campaigns, every politician goes to bow down to Amakosi, Izinduna, and the traditional leaders or the chiefs to ask them permission. Why? Because they realize that the land belongs to the traditional leaders. And who are the traditional leaders? The traditional leaders, these are kings and queens and those that have been naturally put in place to govern the affairs of man. They do not elect themselves. They stay for a long time. But when it comes to the issues of governance, we see that the kings and the queens are excluded. My question is very simple. Today is the mining Indaba in Cape Town. How many traditional leaders from South Africa or from Southern Africa? I saw the president of Zambia giving a brilliant speech. I saw the president of Botswana giving a brilliant speech. I've heard the president Cyril Ramaphosa giving a brilliant speech. My question is, we are talking about mining where the minerals, they belong to the land which our traditional leaders, they oversee. Our kings and queens, they oversee. The citizens, they oversee. How many kings have delivered a speech at the mining Indaba? None. How many chiefs have delivered a speech at the mining Indaba? None. All the people that have delivered their speeches and giving a roadmap on how mining should be done are political figureheads who their lifespan is tied to a constitutional term. If it's 4 years, it's 4 years. If it's 5 years, it's 5 years. We must sit back as Africans and say it's a shame for us because our traditional leaders and our kings seems they have been stripped of their power. In Africa, see, we say, inkosi ngenkosi ngabantu. Inkosi ngenkosi ngabantu. The king, he's a king by his people, not by his political party. Remember that political figureheads, they put the constitution of their political party supreme before the constitution of the country. And in every constitution of the country in Africa, I would want to hear from Africans out there with different constitutions, which can suggest to say our national constitution states that chiefs and kings and traditional leaders are only to be consulted, but policy has to be made by political figureheads. I want to hear that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to say to us, political leaders, traditional leaders, let's get back and begin to rethink and say, if Africa has to be governed well, how are we going to move from this democracy, which is foreign over the continent, into getting what we call Africacy, so that the African leaders gets their power, such that when a political leader is elected into power, they still get back to hear from the kings and the queens so that our continent can be governed well. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to submit that I'm calling upon every African of goodwill to begin to rethink and say, let's join our hands together and let's see to it that power is retained to the Africans. Because most of our political leaders, the first thing they save is for the imperialists and those that colonized us. Haven't you wondered that our minerals, the pricings are still done in London? That's why we've got the London Metal Exchange. Yet the mining is being done in Africa. I am calling upon our African leaders that we should begin to rethink such that the prices of copper, the prices of diamond, the prices of gold will be determined by our African people, those that are working in the land. The people who till the land are the ones to determine the worth of their produce. But it's not so because of democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, haven't you wondered that during the time of campaign, politicians, they kneel down to us. But once we elect them in power, we kneel down and we bow down to them. Haven't you wondered that politicians, once they go into power, they change their phone numbers? Before they get to power, they distribute their phone numbers to every one of us. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Africa to rethink. This has been your friend and brother, Emmanuel Nkoma, from the African Institute of Leadership and Governance, saying it's time for Africa to arise. Siyabonga. May God bless Africa. Inkosi sikeleli Africa. Mungu abariki Africa. Asante sana.